Peace to the saints. We are talking about a critical topic, which is something that could change the housing market. It could further enslave Americans. It's a new dream that's being sold. And Donald Trump is a salesman. I find it quite disturbing that our president, does meme coin rug pulls. That's pretty crazy. And I guess this is metaphorically speaking the next scam. The fundamentals of the American economy probably haven't been sound since Tricky Dicky, maybe even earlier than that. So we're going to get into it. I want to listen to how the media is pitching this idea. Uh, but after I go through a couple media representations of Trump's idea, I then want to take out the time to go through a bit of the history, because the history is so very important. And unfortunately, our grandparents, for whatever reason, haven't really made us aware of the ways in which the world has changed. So let's go ahead and dig in. As we go through, do share your comments, questions below, and using the information below or using the information on this profile. The important thing to understand is that, and I was thinking about this earlier, younger, or I should say my earlier age, I was a little too cavalier, and I used to think that things didn't apply to me. I used to think things didn't matter that did matter. So, for example, you might be thinking, Marquette, I'm not planning to buy a house anytime soon. It doesn't matter. You see, understanding the banking industry, lending, and the mortgage industry, it has a greater impact than only on those who are buying homes. It impacts the economy at large. And furthermore, if you're going to mature, get older, and mature financially and otherwise, you'll probably want to buy a house at some point. You should know what these changes are going to be and how they might affect you. We're talking about money here, ladies and saints. We're talking about serious stuff. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into this work. Here we go. And I'm starting off with the shortest one. I do have PBD queued up because I like the way he explains things, because I think he speaks to the generation of folks who are age 16 to 35. And so I'm curious to hear what he suggests. But let's start off with a simple piece. This is nearly a 3-minute video.
All right, so President Trump appeared to float a major change to home buying on social media over the weekend. The president posted this image on Truth Social.
Now, this is President Roosevelt. We're clearly not about to get much of a lesson because this is only a 3-minute video. What you should be asking yourself is, what context was President Roosevelt in that he felt he needed to do this? Is this something that happens when the economy is strong or when the economy is weak? What are the implications? 30-year mortgage. At the time, how was that received by the American population? Does a 30-year deal sound like a good deal? Does that sound like something you want to be a part of? Does a 50-year deal sound like something you want to be a part? It sounds ludicrous. Yeah, half of the people watching right now, why would the bank even let you get a 50-year mortgage? You're probably not even going to live that long. What's the life expectancy in America? Hold on one second. This is ridiculous. We got to buy a house when you're 8 years old. This is ludicrous. Life expectancy in the United States is 78 years old. 78 years old. With that logic, I wouldn't even want to give a mortgage to Marquett Burton. Like, I don't know, is bro going to be alive to pay this off? We're getting ridiculous here. I shouldn't say we, I should say the American government is getting ridiculous here. The idea that they put you in a position to where you can't afford to pay for shelter, where you can't own anything, and you're being abused by the taxation system. It is truly angering. We're in revolutionary times, and we will move forward with the revolution.
With a headshot of former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt under a title of 30-year mortgage and a headshot of President Trump under a title of 50-year mortgage.
This guy's a moron. You should be ashamed of that. You should be ashamed of the idea that in the wealthiest country that has ever existed, you're telling people to take half a century merely to provide a roof over their head, the most basic of human things: shelter, sex, and sustenance. It shouldn't take you 50 years to pay for a roof over your head.
The director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency then followed up saying, quote, "We are indeed working on the 50-year mortgage, a complete game changer."
Now, this is basically the wealthiest class of America and of the world taking advantage of everyone else and saying, you know, I might own a couple houses, multi-million-dollar houses, apartments in Tribeca and, you know, flats across the world. But for you peons, I'm going to let you all struggle just to get one house. And I'll let you struggle for your whole life. That's great. It's like, and, you know, he's proud to put his name and face on this scam. Whew, there's so much. I've been doing so much research and I got a lot to share. Not on this, but on some other stuff.
Is it really? For more on this, let's join Beat.
This chick looks not intelligent. Yeah, I hate to say it, but she doesn't even look intelligent. But let's hear what she has to say.
We are joined now by CBS
I just don't feel confident she's about to give any good information.
News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady, who is helping me stumble through things. It's a Monday, so I'm still pulling myself together.
Thank you, effeminate black guy, ambiguously black guy, who might not be black. He might be Latino or Indian, like just we don't know. Bro, shut up. Let this ditz tell us what she has to say.
Kind to yourself.
Thank you, Kelly. I will be.
So it's basically.
You guys stop bad joking. Can I get some information here? Give me some information here. Jesus.
The same thing as a 30-year mortgage, except you would pay that loan back over a 50-year period instead of a 30-year period. Now, you brought up.
That was a completely idiotic comment. I need you to say something we couldn't think of on our own. It's basically the same thing as a 30-year mortgage that's got accepted 50 years. Well, thanks, Dodo. I think we all realize that part. How about you give us some meaningful information, like you're going to pay a lot more in interest? How about you give us some meaningful information, like we've damn near doubled the term of the term of the loan, but we've not chopped the monthly payments in half? Why don't you give us some meaningful information, like you're going to be just paying interest up front? Come on now.
That post that the president had said 50-year mortgage, and then there was FDR with the 30. Actually, you know, you go back to prior to the Great Depression, prior to that FDR administration, there was no such thing as a long-term 30-year mortgage. So something like this has been.
He just showed an image with FDR being the creator of the 30-year mortgage. So, of course, that didn't exist before then. Oh, my goodness. Was she not around for that part?
Done before, just not to this extent. And you think, why is this happening right now? I mean, there is an affordability crisis when it comes to homeowners.
Is that new doofus? If there wasn't an affordability crisis, FDR wouldn't have created the 30-year mortgage. Okay? Now you might say, Marquett, well, before we had the privilege of taking a damn near a quarter of a century to, actually more than a quarter of a century, to pay off a freaking house. Well, what were people doing? What were Americans doing? Were they just homeless? Were they homeless if they couldn't get loans? Before the widespread adoption of the 30-year fixed rate mortgage in the United States, the system was significantly different, particularly before the Great Depression and the federal reforms of the 1930s. Now, mind you, I am a capitalist. They say capitalism is cyclical, and there's boom and bust. I find it curious that the quality of capitalism seems to degrade every time it busts. Makes you start to wonder about these other systems, perhaps what the Chinese are doing. Anyways, short-term mortgages, typically 5 to 10 years. Marquette, you're saying I could have paid off a house in 5 to 10 years? Yeah, that's what people were doing. Yeah, it was a different time. This was the norm for residential mortgages. The term short meaning the full loan came due quickly. And apparently it was manageable, right? So you're telling me that in the richest country that has ever been, the uppermost class, the political class, the plutocrats have been degrading your quality of life over time. They've been devaluing the dollar. They've been enriching themselves and allowing the non-elite to suffer greatly. Mm? Yes, that's what's been happening. And they try to hide away the history of what used to be. I remember I'd hear my grandmother say things, and old black women is just black women, maybe just old and young, typically a bit negative. And I used to listen to my grandmother and think, shut up, what do you know? But she would speak wisdom. Some of the things she would say would be hard to believe, like a hamburger used to be 10 cents. I used to be like, Shorty is senile. She is senile. And she is also in denial because there's no way a hamburger was 10 cents. It's impossible. No, that's how much they've devalued the dollar. It was true. She said you just go catch a flight like a bus. You go through, there's no security check. You just pay for your ticket and get on. What? They don't harass you and treat you like a stranger and put their finger in places that make you think you're getting a proctal exam? Is that even a word? Proctal? You know what I mean? When the doctor's like, and you're like, isn't there better technology than that? Point is, the government over time has stolen your freedom. They've stolen your savings. They've stolen all of the things that you really would like to keep. Huh? Come on now. The history is important. It's important that our elders teach us what has been. You think you're free. You have not the foggiest idea of what freedom is. Even myself, I'm not much older than some of you are older than me. Some of you are the same age, and many of you are younger. When I was in high school, we'd go down to Mexico with no passport at all. Not even a real ID. I didn't have a driver's license or a government ID. I kid you not, you can go into Mexico and back out of Mexico with a high school ID, which means basically a fake ID, nothing real. Yes, come on now. Non-government issued ID. Anyways, these loans typically require the borrower to make small interest only, often, or interest mostly payments for the terms of the loan. At the end of the term, a very large lump sum payment, balloon payment, covering the remaining principal was due. Now, apparently it worked out. Apparently it was working out until it didn't. And when it didn't work out, that was due to the crash of the stock market. Now, one thing we should ask ourselves is, can we have capitalism without a stock market? Come on. It's an important question. Yes, indeed. Since most borrowers couldn't save up the full principal in a few years, they typically had to refinance the loan, get a new mortgage to pay off the balloon payment. This worked well until the Great Depression, when banks stopped refinancing, leading to massive foreclosures. Well, the question that never gets answered is like, did there have to be a Great Depression? Does there have to be a stock market? And if it was so common that everyone was refinancing, why weren't the loans just on longer terms? And was the refi favorable to the people refining? Were they refining and getting better interest rates? These are all really important questions to ask. And the truth is that we should have been taught all of this in history, particularly a class called American history. And I would dare say that there's a reason that you're not taught a lot of basic things like, how do you do your taxes? You go to a government school, public high school, which is a government school. The government issues taxes, but they don't teach you how to do your taxes. Maybe it's on purpose. Shout out to Frank supporting the work, came in via Stripe, or via the Stripe link in the description. I appreciate you. Also acknowledge Marcus. Just went and got dripped out. Oh man, he got some cold fleece sweats. And this is a good time to do it. Got the long sleeve man and woman brand. He also got the Patriarch t-shirt. Good drip indeed. Okay, very good. And shout out to the folks supporting the work. I appreciate you. May I also acknowledge via PayPal. Shout out to Dominic, writes Peace of Saints Tuition. I also acknowledge Miles. Writes, Peace of Saints, my full message is sent by email. I'll take a look-see. Mr. Gardner writes, Peace of Saints tuition. I sent you an email regarding Saints weekend, and I did get it, and we'll make sure that you are all set. And I appreciate that. It'll be a pleasure to see you again. And Miles sent an email. He writes, Peace of the Saints, Mr. Burton. What are your thoughts on Trump's one-year deal with China? I think that one-year deals are pretty pathetic, especially when you're a second-term president with 3 years remaining, number one. And then number two, when you're up against a dictator who has an infinite amount of time. It only reveals that you are losing the trade war and much else. He writes, in the recent Republican Jewish coalition rally that's happened recently with Officer Tatum and the rest of the conservative sellouts. Well, that's not a new thing, right? That the certain population has lobbied and invested money and is making every effort to ensure their domination. That's nothing new. The conservative white supremacists are infighting right now, and it all stems from Tucker and Nick Fuentes. Also, why do all of their white saviors crumble under pressure? Well, I think it's because of the fundamental fact that any strong white man does not, is probably less inclined to be a white supremacist. The white supremacist position is typically held by those who are certainly inferior individuals, and it's fueled by that primitive drive to procreate, survival of the fittest. But being that you're an individual who's inferior, you have fewer options, and then they start to lash out at the black man, believing he's taking good white women that he could have, which is not the case. And no, it's the idea, like the driving idea of survival, and knowing that they're having a harder time getting a mate. That's why you find a lot of their leaders are unattractive and incels, like Nerd Fuentes. Virgin by choice? I personally think he's a homosexual. By my estimation. But anyways, I say that to say the guy who actually embodies the Aryan Superman ideal, tall, good-looking, chiseled jaw, great genetics, well, he doesn't need to be invested in racism because he can get all the beautiful white women he wants. He doesn't feel like he's in competition with black athletes. He feels like he's going to do well in the marketplace. There's enough to go around because he's, a top dog eating top shelf and, taking the cream of the crop. So he doesn't feel as though he has to disparage the black man, who apparently is a pretty attractive character.
Cost prohibitive for many Americans. And I was actually reading a Redfin analysis, and they say that U.S. homebuyers on average are spending 39% of their income on housing, when 30% is the rule of thumb.
I was going to say that's way too high.
Exactly. And so something like this, the idea is to get people lower monthly payments, may be able to afford.
Okay, now pay attention to this part. They're talking about lower monthly payments. Well, if that's the case, that it's lower monthly payments, let's see how much lower. You've all doubled the term of the loan, right? A doubling would be from 30 years to 60 years, but when you earn from 30 years to 50 years, it's damn near double. So the in line with nearly doubling the term of the loan, will you be nearly cutting in half the monthly payments? At least give me 30% off, right? Which is to say, if I was going to pay $2,000 per month for a mortgage, is it now going to be like $1,200? I mean, that would make sense if things were fair. But we know when interest is involved, usury, riba is involved, then things probably aren't going to be so good looking.
Afford a home.
Sure, but there would still be a supply issue with housing.
Yes.
People might sit in these homes for longer if you have a longer mortgage. And when I saw the 50-year number, I thought to myself, what is the average age in the U.S. again? I think it's maybe people in their 80s if they're lucky.
Right.
So is it really advisable to take a 50-year loan on anything, considering not just the potential gains, but the debts if you die?
Now, mind you, 2 minutes and they've still not said anything of consequence. I think one comical consideration is if you are, say, 30 and you take a 50-year mortgage, and most people are not going to live to 80 in the United States, especially as health increasingly declines, and the low quality foods will carry on. I think we got Jeff Bezos is making fake salmon. So, anyways, if you pass away and you're just about to finish paying off that mortgage, what does your land in your home pass to the state, to the government, because you didn't finish paying it off? You're probably not going to have kids, right? Because we have a declining birth rate. Women are too educated to have children. So this is all very interesting stuff. It's like yet another way that the West finds to hurt itself, instead of figuring out the fundamental issue, which is, why are Americans not able to earn enough? Why is the U.S. dollar not strong enough? Why can't we solve those issues? Instead, they say, well, here's another way to put yourself into long-term debt,
etc.
Well, and that's where there's been a lot of pushback, because the pros, as we just said, it's a lower monthly payment. And I actually crunched the numbers: a $500,000 mortgage, 6% interest rate. On a 50-year mortgage, you would pay over $400 less a month. So that's really attractive. But
well, first off, why are those numbers not being put on the screen so we can look at them and inspect them? Number one. Number two, did you say a $500,000 mortgage? Did she say a $500,000 mortgage? I just think it's worth her justifying why we're using certain numbers. Did she say a 6% interest rate? I'd just be curious to hear as to why it's a 6% interest rate. Like, what I would have liked her to have done is said, hey, the average credit score in America is 700, whatever it may be. It's probably a lot lower than that, right? Probably like 650. I don't know what's the average credit score. Yeah, whatever it is, it sucks. So if she said, hey, an average credit score in America is a 650, the average home price in America is 400K, average monthly payment on a 30-year fix at 7% or 8%, which is more likely for this credit score, is going to be this monthly amount. You're going to save this percentage, so your payment would go from 2,000 to 1,800, or fill in the blank. I think that it's just like woefully bad. Like,
your point,
terrible.
It means you're going to
There we go. There's no numbers here.
be spending a lot more in interest over the life of that.
Pros: lower monthly payment. Yeah, most people who are dumb are short-term thinkers. Also, people who are poor, they're illiquid. Of course, they're going to be short-term thinkers. And here's the funny thing: on the pros, they listed the same damn thing 2 times. No, really, check this out. Marquett, are you a genius of some sort? No, I just pay attention. For example, lower monthly payment. Well, that means you're going to have more money, right? Then it says more room in budget. You dumb F. That's the same thing. Did you try to fool me? Cons: pay more interest. That's one thing. Second con: longer to build up equity. That's a separate thing. So the 2 cons are 2 separate things. The pros, there's only one pro, but it's listed 2 separate times. Come on now. You guys with me here? Are you with me here? Are you understanding here? Shout out to Robert. Just went and got the Make America Straight Again hat. Yes, indeed. Now, don't wear that to a restaurant. You heard me? Because people are mad. They're sick out here. You heard me? Shout out to Darren. He writes, peace to the saints. Appreciate you. Shout out to RTBLA. Writes, peace to the saints. Respect, tuition, assassin, or nothing. Albatar. Shout out to the real ones. Good to see you again. Yes, indeedy.
Loan. And a lot of critics have said you could die before you own your home. It's going to take a lot longer to actually
And all she needs to do, instead of saying what a lot of critics have said, is just Google the simple question of, what is the average age of a first-time home buyer in America? I'll Google it, since apparently she doesn't want to. Average age of first-time home buyer, 40 years old. Damn, that's a lot higher than I thought. The average or median age of a first-time home buyer has reached an all-time high of 40 years. So now you take that 40 years plus a 50-year mortgage. Now we're talking about you need to live to 90 years old to pay that off. Nah, hell nah. Your property is going straight to the government. You probably didn't have kids, and if you did have kids, they might not be able to take this thing over. That's insanity. This is a real nut job idea. Really, it's a crackpot scheme.
Build up that equity, but proponents say, well, better to even have the chance to own a home. So that's really where you're hearing the pros and cons. Is it advisable? If you can avoid it, I would say don't go with it.
Right. And everybody has a different financial situation.
Okay, great. So she said don't go with it. Now let's see if people are being honest as we go through. And I think this was an atrocious breakdown, mind you. I think she did a really bad job at explaining that. So my thesis that she's a moron, my thesis that she's a dumb moron was very true. And that's how much I thought she was not smart. I said dumb moron. That's redundant. It's completely unnecessary. But it turned out to be true. Black guy wasn't any better. Anyways, let's get back to this work. Send in your comments, questions as we go through. Now, here's PBD going through it. And PBD always cracks me up. He's like, hey, so-and-so, can you pull up that? And he never just says, he's like, can you pull up that? Funny guy.
Housing Director confirms administration 50-year mortgage.
Trying to find an answer on affordability for housing, which right now we're seeing one of the worst housing markets that we've seen in recent times. And so the 50-year mortgage is a play to lower people's monthly mortgage payments. But the downside is, especially early on, all of that payment will be going to interest. And of course, since you're paying over 50 years and not over 30 years, you're going to be paying off that mortgage for a lot longer. So the details are still to be worked out, but it looks to be like the president's looking for a quick fix to a market that is fundamentally broken right now.
Okay, so this guy's a Democrat, right? Because you see in the back, if you zoom in on the books.
Now, here's the thing. That's not a fix, because the problem is not the length of the mortgage. The problem is the affordability. The problem is the weakness of the dollar. The problem is the low level of skill of the average American. The problem is cultural. The problem is policy. The problem is taxes. The problem is that we're a declining empire. The problem is not, should it be a 30-year mortgage or a 50-year or fill in the blank. So it's not a fix. Fix is completely the wrong word. It's a scam.
You'll see the New Deal. Go back a little bit. Right. Oh, do you know, while this guy's saying this, it's so funny. Do you know who came up with the, can you type right there, Rob? Can you pull that up? Here's who came up with the 30-year mortgage.
What a dweeb. This guy, Adam, is a totally disgusting individual. It's like he doesn't have enough brains to realize that PBD wants to unveil the president who came up with a 30-year mortgage. So PBD says it twice, like, hey, Rob, pull that up. Can we talk about who came up with the 30-year mortgage? And then you got Adam's goofy ass over here like, FDR? FDR is like, dude, we all know he's trying to like tease that for the audience. Can you shut up, dummy boy? Like, how can you be that dim-witted and also be from the tribe of people who are supposed to have the very high IQs? Extraordinary, like, goofy little rascal.
Can you type right there, Rob? Can you pull that up? Here's
I'm gonna rewind it. You're gonna hear Patrick asking the question, wanting to tease it for the audience, and then you hear Goofy Boy in the background who has no ability to take social cues. Somebody send him the Master Communicator course or Boston University, because he really needs to be tuned up.
They're reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crash.
Do you know while this guy's saying this, it's so funny. Do you know who came up with the 30-year mortgage?
Who?
Do you know who came up with the 30-year mortgage?
that?
I want you to think about, can you type right there, Rob? Can you pull that up? Here's who came up with the 30-year mortgage.
FDR.
Yeah, FDR.
And he says it twice, like he wasn't heard the first time. It's like, you're not a little kid. You're a grown man. Stop seeking attention. Now, let's be real here. The dude on the far right, the older white guy, we all know he's a smart guy. So why is it that he's not calling out like the dumb guy, Adam? Well, it's because he's man enough to know I don't need to be in the center of attention. I don't have to get patted on the head like, you're smart, you're smart. Only dumb people feel the need to get patted on the head and be called smart. The other guy was wise enough to know, like, be silent. Pat's doing something. He's setting up something. Let's listen. Let's let him do his thing without interrupting him. And these are the kind of basics that I cover in the Master Communicator course. basics in communication. Then I get to the higher level things. But I have to cover the basics because sometimes if you commit faux pas or you fail to assess like the temperature of the room, it's going to hurt you. Me, I would be in this room looking at this guy like this guy's an imbecile. I'm not doing any business with him. He's a total moron.
Came up with the 30-year mortgage.
I don't know if it's that thermostat that's really pumping right now, but if you could just like turn it 2 degrees below what it says it is.
So did you say the same thing back in the days, fellow? I don't know what your name is, but you know, well-spoken guy a minute ago.
Crashed.
So he did 30 years. Trump's going to 50 years. By the way, Tom, the question is, if you're a bank, would you get into the 50-year business game? Would we do that knowing you're collecting the interest up front? Would you enter?
Well, I think the banks would do that. Well, in capitalism, you have to compete. If one bank decides to do a 50-year mortgage program and you're going to attract a high volume of customers, theoretically, you may be dealing with a finite number of customers or a finite share of the market. You might be taking away from people's market share because you're doing the 50-year and they're not. So they're going to have to compete. So of course they're going to do a 50-year. It's basically like saying, if so-and-so selling Teslas and another guy's going to create a cheaper version of Tesla, you know, will anyone compete with them or just going to let them have it? Like, no, there's going to be competition. And in fact, there's going to be a race to the bottom. So for sure, other banks are going to get involved in that 50-year deal because a lot of consumers who are mathematically illiterate, which is most Americans, they are looking for what's going to work for their current budget, not their future budget. So the lower monthly payment is always going to be an attractive deal. So of course, banks are going to get into it.
10 to 30 versus 50, because how do you set it up? You still have to find a way to make it profitable for the banks, right?
Right.
So the bank has to get their money or else there's no incentive for them to want to sell this loan, okay? What would be the incentive for banks to sell 50-year loans?
Well, as long as they felt.
Now, mind you, this is probably the same conversation that was had when the banks were going from the 5 to 10-year short-term loans to the 30-year, which was also a huge increase. In fact, it was much bigger of an increase from a percentage standpoint. There's that. Number two, also observe how Pat bet David, the back of his chair is just rocking and shaking the whole time. These kind of people, especially males with this nervous energy, I don't really like men who lack peace. It kind of it lets you know something's off with them. Look at the back of
30
the
versus
chair.
50, because how do you set it up?
The chair is shaking because he just keeps gyrating his leg. It's like, bro, chill.
You still have to find a way to make it profitable for the banks, right?
Right.
So the bank has to get their money or else there's no incentive for them to want to sell this loan, okay? What would be the incentive for banks to sell 50-year loans?
Well, as long as they felt that the underlying asset wasn't going to drop. Now, so here's what the bank has to do. Your house is the collateral. You stop paying Vinny, I'm going to take your house, I'm going to sell it to the next guy. Mm-hmm. That's what a bank will do. We'll auction it. He'll auction it off. Now then, what it means, Pat, is the first 10 years of that 50-year loan, the bank has to underwrite it and be comfortable that that house won't decline in value. You follow that? Because not much will be paid off in 10 years, Pat. Not much at all. So if you...
So what he's saying applies to a 30-year loan as well, but carry on.
You and I, Tom and Pat's bank, and we do a 50-year mortgage, our underwriting has to say, are we sure that house is not going to go down in these first 10 years?
Yeah.
Because if we have to seize the house and...
None of this is very interesting for people who have had any minimal experience in real estate. You know that before the loan is finalized, you have all kinds of assessments and appraisals, and it has a strong sense of what the house is worth. And generally, we know that real estate appreciates. So what he's saying is just basics. It's almost not even worth saying.
Auction it, we got to make sure that underwrites. 62 is the payment. 50-year, 6 1/4, 400,000, 2179. So about a 3.
So I'm gonna now he's getting to some numbers. So let's see.
But I just did a little analysis. 30-year, 400,000.
Okay, so we're talking about a $400,000 house on a 30-year fixed rate mortgage.
6 1/4. $2,462 is the payment.
$2,462 is the payment. So we'll just round it to $2,400 is the monthly.
50-year, 6.25, 400,000, 2179. So
I think he's saying the interest rate is 6.25.
50-year, 6.25, 400,000, 2179.
So he said the payment for a 50-year mortgage is $2,100. Personally, I don't find that to be a significant difference. Now, sure, for some people that's going to make a legitimate difference, but the truth is it's not major, and certainly not a big enough difference to go from a freaking 30-year mortgage to a 50-year mortgage. So you're basically being scammed, and you're being forced into this position because A, you've been brainwashed into the idea that you need to own a house. Ownership is everything, and ownership can make sense in certain circumstances. So you've been taught that you need to own a house. That's number one. So you're culturally driven, and some people identify that as a part of maturity. So you're conditioned, yeah, I got to buy a house, I got to buy a house. And then secondly, because you grew up in a debt/credit society, you think it's okay to be in all forms of debt and to be financially pinched, especially if you grew up in poverty. You think being financially pinched and barely making ends meet, you think that's life. And you don't have any greater expectations. Most people, you figure out how to manage while living or subsisting in that way. So with that being the case, it's easy to end up in these predatory situations. And, this might not even be considered officially a predatory loan, but it is in fact a predatory loan. Who would want to be obligated to work for the next 50 years? That's basically what you're doing. Whereas if you didn't own a house, you could stop working. But basically, a 50-year mortgage is an agreement to work for the next 50 years, because low income people, which are the ones who would get this, they don't have passive income. They don't have retirement plans and 401ks. And frankly, Social Security probably won't even be functioning by the time they're old enough to use it. So this is why we need revolution. It's not to create a socialist or a communist system, but just to create a system that's an honest capitalist system. We have far too much thuggery and dishonesty in the current one. Shout out to Frank supporting the work, came in using the Stripe link in the description. I also acknowledge Miles came back via PayPal, writes, Peace of the Saints. I heard this proposal. I about fell out of my chair. The audacity to even propose something so idiotic is insane. Well, the only thing more idiotic than the proposal are the people who will actually take the 50-year mortgage. And I think that there's a good number of those persons. And, frankly, there's a portion of them that will do it because they lack understanding and experience. And then there's another portion that'll do it just because they're not terribly bright. And, it's not upon our leadership class to take advantage of people who lack understanding. In often cases, it's not that they lack understanding because they're dimwits. Sometimes they lack understanding because they've not been exposed to the information. I mean, again, you went to government schools, public schools. They didn't explain to you how a mortgage works. Of course they didn't, but they probably should have, right? Anyways, gentleman writes, it's truly revolutionary times. This has debt slavery written all over it. Oh, indeed. And there's no way some of these houses will ever stand tall for a 50-year loan. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you on that one. I also acknowledge Wayne, writes, Peace of the Saints tuition. Shout out to Seven, writes, Peace of the Saints. How did you feel being on the ground in Texas and spreading the ism? How did you feel afterward? I really enjoyed it. I've been increasingly impressed every time I touch down in the state of Texas. It's nearly its own country. Each of the major cities has its own flavor. Very well developed. People getting on peacefully and way more diverse than I expected. And Dallas, just very diverse, beautiful place with beautiful people. So I very much so enjoyed it. The section there, SAS and DFW, great, honorable men, very militant, did very well with the security detail. We also had a great time, really organized. Shout out to Quat, the executive there. So it was a pleasure just to see what we've built, and a lot of people really mess with the ism. Anyways, but a lot of people really mess with the ism. Sorry about that. I don't know if that was like a fire alarm warning or what have you. But a lot of people mess with the ism, and when we're moving around the city, a lot of folks, whether they're driving by or riding by, they just hollering "Peace of the Saints." So we're really well positioned to take over all of these cities, and we shall. So, and thank you for asking. I appreciate that. And shout out to all those folks who are actually a part of this thing of ours. You heard me? Not the casuals, not the people who just showed up yesterday. Shout out to the real ones. Also, Jefferson writes support for the Kick Live. And I think he was the first person who came in. He actually came in before I even started. And also just another piece on economy. A lot of the things that you're hearing from your political class, just frankly, are not true. These tariffs are being paid by people like you and I. You may go on a number of my sites and find that certain product categories are gone, and that's because of the tariffs. So, for example, I had to remove there's a number of hoodie products, the denim jean jacket product, the soap product, because of the countries that they're manufactured in. I had to remove them because the tariffs are expensive, such that it's cost prohibitive. Now, here's the kicker. One thing that Donald doesn't tell you is that though you're not going to produce it abroad, I'm also not going to produce it in America because the product would be too expensive. Or in some cases, we don't have the craftsmen, artisans, or manufacturing hubs to produce in general, whether it's producing at the right cost or just producing in general. And that's what he doesn't tell you. So what it actually leads to is not for manufacturing to come back to America in some cases. It just limits the number of products and the diversity of products that American consumers have access to. And I've already paid a number of tariffs from various countries, products coming from Latvia, products coming from Australia. And what we can say for sure is that tariffs are a tax on Americans, because I've paid tariffs and I've reduced product offerings based on tariffs. So it's like he turns around and wants to cut a $2,000 check. I'd already spent that in tariffs. So what are you doing here, buddy? Maybe for the people who aren't doing business, maybe it's a check for them. But the truth is they're going to cough up that money anyways, because the products that they do get from certain countries are going to be more expensive. So the Donald has just lied and lied and lied. And at some level, he's just really outmatched and doesn't realize it. And so we're all suffering the Dunning-Kruger effect and secondhand embarrassment at the Donald's actions. He's way, way, way beyond what he's capable of.
So about a $300 difference on a $400,000 mortgage. However, next to no principal is paid off in those first 10 years. Very little. And then it accelerates. So for the banks, more people will qualify using standard, ratios and measurements. But the bank better be sure that those houses don't drop in those first 10 years.
Rob, go back to where you were at right there a minute ago. Watch this. So this is 30-year payment, 30-year loan, 366, 40, $2,400.
Now, this is actually a really good calculation here to look at. And it looks like maybe it's from someone's Instagram or Facebook page. I don't know who that is. But either way, it shows you three different term amounts, 30-year, 40-year, 50-year. It shows the monthly payments. For the 30-year standard, $2,700 rounding. For the 50-year, it's $2,300 rounding. To me, it's not a huge difference monthly, but I'll tell you what is a huge difference. You look at the total interest paid. You go to the 30-year versus the 40-year, the 50-year, it's almost double. That's a huge difference in the amount of interest paid, almost twice as much. And then if you look at the total paid over a lifetime, over the life of the loan, the 30-year, you're going to pay $966,000. Okay, cool. On the 50-year, you're paying $1.4 million. So you're paying so much more money. And this is not because this is for the same house, right? So what it's letting you know is that this is an instrument that's empowering banks to take more money from American citizens. That's what it is. And here's the comedy, though. Check this out. This is what's particularly evil. They're taking money from the American citizens who have the least money. And I'm no Robin Hood. You heard me? I'm not like a save the poor, socialist, communist guy, but I am about honesty and decency. And this is indecent. This is very indecent.
Maybe $150, $130. No, no, you save $270 and eventually end up paying $658,000, $200,000 more.
A scam.
And then 50 years is $2272.
You got Adam in the background interrupting. Just no manners. Shout out to Constantine supporting the work by Venmo. Appreciate you. Also acknowledge. Shout out to Mr. Graham. He writes, Peace to Saints tuition. If only people would become more financially literate. Even hearing people say refinance hurts my head. Adding more front-loaded interest on a new loan. Oof, that part. And still, you got to break that down, what you're saying. Shout out to 7. He writes, regardless of Trump's execution, were tariffs a good strategy? No. But here's the thing. If you're going to have a tariff war, you need to apparently plan it out, because what Trump did not estimate was China's highly effective retaliation with the rare earths. And he started off with big talk, playing hardball, and very quickly he had to backpedal. And that just shows you that he did not really understand the chessboard. So tariffs could have been a good strategy, but he wasn't well positioned for this war. And so he got obliterated, and really he lost on two ends. He lost because American consumers seeing rising inflation and rising product costs, and they're going to see less diversity of product options on the marketplace. And then he also gets embarrassed on the international stage. So it's like, what did he gain? And of course, in many cases, manufacturing is not going to come back to America. Like, Americans don't want to make shoes. They don't want to make low cost garments. They don't want to do garment assembly. So it's like you put us in a situation where we can't buy the Adidas sneakers that we might want, but we also are not going to produce the Adidas replacement. And if we do, it's going to be much more expensive. Shout out to 7. He writes, for a healthy family which evolves into a culture or society, what metrics would you use to define productivity/success? I keep hearing Republicans referencing GDP. Very good. As if it's the only true measure of success. Well, GDP is actually only a relevant measure of success if you're comparing countries. And I think that the Westerners, if you will, are just very controlling animals, and their goal is to outdo everyone, not to be happy themselves, but to be concerned with them projecting the image of dominating, controlling, and outdoing every other group of people, every other civilization. And for that, GDP is a great measure for that. Oh, our economy is bigger than your economy. It doesn't take into account wealth and inequality, which I don't think that everyone needs to be equal. It doesn't take, which would be a Gini coefficient. It doesn't take into account per capita income, which is a much more important consideration of the health of a nation. So I'd probably look at wealth inequality. It shouldn't be too bad. I would also look at per capita income, and I would look at levels of the rankings of math and science scores. And I think collectively that would be a good assessment of where a society and culture stands, and if they're able to compete among the nations of the world such that they might have a high quality of life. Thank you for that question, and thank you for supporting.
Which is $142 less of the 40-year, and you end up paying $863 long term. So,
what's the price of the house?
Yeah,
Is that based on $500,000? What is this?
I think
And what's the
that's a
interest rate?
$500,000 loan. It's a $500,000, 5% fixed.
Yeah.
Okay. PPD. I mean, you already know where I stand on this.
By the way, I just want to say this man's wearing a toupee, and I want everyone to know I'm the first person to point out that this brother is wearing a toupee. Oh, you knew that? Look at this. Gray on the sides, but all black on the top. Here's the other thing. Male pattern baldness. I'm in larges for you guys too. Male pattern baldness. And let me know if you can see my cursor as I go through. You don't have male pattern baldness, right? He has the thinning on the temples, and then you have the hairline that's perfectly sitting where it should be if you were like in your late 20s. His temples are in their like 50s, but his hairline is in its late 20s. Impossible. Further, this short growth shows the graying. You never see any graying on the top at all. It's because it's fake hair. And it doesn't even look right. And also a good way to look if someone has fake hair is the origin of the hairs, especially the ones in the front. Like PBD, for example.
I know you're running your.
See right there, there's a direct shot right there. And this hairline, which is curiously straight as opposed to being curved, is all dark hair. You can't really see the origin of the hairs very well. There's no graying whatsoever. This is a wig. Like, he's a grown man with a damn lace front. That's crazy. Insanity. Now let's go to PBD real quick. And I don't want to skip ahead on accents. Oh, there's PBD coming right up. Okay.
Your numbers. What are you thinking on this right now?
Well, here.
Boom, there's PBD. Now, PBD's hair makes perfect sense for what I just described. You see the curvature of the hairline. It's not a straight line across like the other dude who had the wig surgery. This is a curved situation. You can also see the origin of the hairs much better because they're actually going into his goddamn scalp. We further see that the temples, though curved, have the same level of thickness and coloration consistently through. This is PBD's actual hair.
Here's the thing, Adam. I've never lost money buying a house because the math on buying a house is the following. Here's the math on buying a house. Okay, let's just kind of do. You know, if you just do the flat interest, you're not making a lot of money. If I buy a $600,000 house, how much down payment am I putting on a $600,000 house, Tom? If I got a 750 credit score,
a $600,000 house, you'll have to put down about
10%, 20%. Okay,
20% you have to put down.
Okay, let's just say, let's just type in Rob. If I have a $600,000 house, 750 credit score, how much down payment would I need to put?
Well, the real question is, well, why would you say you have a 750 credit score? The average U.S. credit score is about 715, which is significantly lower than 750. That's considered good. So that being the case, I don't know if we should quite call it 750. Carrying on.
Put down. Can I do 10%?
Vinny, my boy Vinny's going to get a
like
VA.
there are some states who give you a first-time home.
Yeah, that's what
buyer
I'm. First time. Let's just say 10%.
Yeah.
So if I do first time, I'm putting $60K down,
And
right?
you have to pay P&I.
So I'm financing
$60K, and the average American doesn't have $2,000 in savings. So he's saying you have to put down $60K. So he's already being very generous in terms of the amount of savings that the borrower would have, in terms of the credit score the borrower would have, and also the assumed lifespan that the borrower would live to be at least 90 years old to pay the thing off.
40 is what I'm financing. Okay. So now, what is the rate of return on real estate the last decade?
5%.
Okay.
If that.
But what I'm saying is fine.
Sure.
Go 5%. If we do 5% on that 600K, 5% on 600K over 10 years, 6 to 7% average, let's take 6%. Okay. So what is the price of this $600,000?
So all of this little thought journey that he's going on is largely irrelevant. And in fact, I'd say it's actually a red herring and digression from the main topic. So I'm going to leave PBD. We're going to go on and listen to what another fella has to say about this one. And as we go through, if you have any comments, questions, feel free to use the information below. I know folks had asked a question in the chat. If you're serious about your question, feel free to use this information to send it in. We'd be happy to review it.
What's up, guys? It's Graham here. So this is absolutely crazy. Over the weekend, President Trump tweeted the idea, and I know I might get some pushback for saying this, but to me it's obvious. A 50-year mortgage is an absolute disaster waiting to happen, and no one should
Okay, now we've consistently seen that pretty much everyone's saying it's a bad idea.
ever take that option.
But hey, mind you, I bet when the 30-year mortgage came out, people were like, what the? I bet it was the same thing. Then you got desensitized, and then it seemed okay.
In fact, a 50-year mortgage is completely uncharted territory, and if one thing goes wrong, it could completely devastate both the housing market and the borrower. So let's talk about the actual math behind getting a 50-year mortgage if and when it ever makes sense. And most people have very little understanding with how this works and why it's a really, really bad idea. Although before we go into that, more big thank all of the 40 and wins the
Oh yeah, while this video is buffering, I do want to thank all of you
limitless.
who are here
But the
watching.
30-year term is often seen as the safest. It offers the most flexibility, the most stability. Your price is fixed until the home is paid off, and if you qualify, they're pretty easy to get because almost every bank offers them. However, there is a bit of a catch because your interest payments are front-loaded towards the beginning of the loan. For example, with any fixed-rate mortgage.
Now, mind you, this is actually something that I believe most people do not comprehend. And I think that it just shows you that our government, our financial system, our culture, our economic system is set up to screw you over. This should have been taught to everyone. But I think very few people, including people who currently own homes, do not understand how mortgages work. Back during the housing crisis, when there was the subprime lending, certainly those people didn't know how things worked. They didn't understand the concept of an adjustable rate. They didn't understand balloon payments. They didn't understand the concept of being underwater until they were underwater. And, you know, that's just not right. Shout out to Heels In. And I'm all about personal accountability, but when you're offering complex financial products to everyday people who are, you know, welders, janitors, teachers, you know, cops, hospital workers, nurses, they have jobs and full-time occupations. They don't have time to become a student of your financial product. They assume that you're being honest and fair at a level. They assume America has consumer protections, and they don't think that you're going to give them a mortgage that one year they're going to have a $3,000 a month payment, and then, you know, the next month out of nowhere, they're going to have a payment that's going to all of a sudden be $8,000 a month. And they're kind of like, whoa, how the hell did that happen? Just a dramatic example, but I think you get the point. And that's how people end up underwater. They took out these expensive loans, essentially. First off, they should have been able to get the loan, but that's a different story.
Your monthly payment is split into two parts, principal and interest. In the beginning, most of your payment goes towards interest because you still have the full loan balance, and so very little of your monthly payment actually pays down the loan. But as time goes on and your loan balance gets smaller, more of that payment begins going towards principal, and over time, you could finally start building equity. Like this chart really shows it perfectly. As you could see, at first your monthly payment consists of almost all interest, but by the time year 20 comes around, this flips to the point where most of your payment becomes equity.
Now, can I simplify this for you guys if you're sitting there and you're maybe not following the chart? Let's just say this. Let's say you're paying $1,000 a month, if you like, paying $1,000 a month. And in paying $1,000 a month, of that $1,000 in month one, maybe $900 goes to the interest, not the principal, meaning you bought a $100,000 house. And if you paid $1,000, that doesn't mean that now your loan, you only owe $99,000. No, my dear boy, you owe $99,900 because only $100 went to the actual principal cost, whereas the other $900 you spent went to the interest, which is to say the bank, not helping you own the house, but it went to the bank, their profit. So the bank's profit is front loaded, is what he's saying. And your monthly payment will be consistently the same throughout the time. But say in year one, you're paying $1,000 a month in year one, and $900 went to the interest on the loan, which is the bank's profit, and only $100 went to actually paying for your house. Whereas if you catch the person in year 20 and paying the loan, $7,000, but this time $600 is going toward the principal cost, which is the cost of the home itself, and maybe only $400 is being paid out to interest. And if you go to the end of the loan, it's really favorable to the buyer, in as much as maybe $900 is going to the principal cost of the home, and just $100 going to profit the bank in the form of interest. So that being said, we see that most people don't understand that. All they understand is that I pay this amount of money for 30 years, and then I get to say I own a home in the meantime, even though it's actually, in fact, the bank that owns the home. But there you go. So.
And that's where things get very interesting. See, the typical person only keeps their home for an average of 12.3 years.
Now, this is really good information. Shout out to this guy right here. This is a really important data point, whereas the first video I played, the 3-minute one, not even long enough to give meaningful information. The woman was a bimbo. They didn't say anything worth hearing. The second video, they kind of touched on some important things, but it wasn't a dense, it wasn't rich with information. It was like for every minute of listening, you maybe got like a little something that was useful. This has been quite dense with good information, and it's really hitting. It says the typical U.S. home buyer spends 12.3 years in their home. That's really important information because it leads you to ask about, well, is it default time? Is it refinance time? Is it sell the home time? But pretty much a move is being made. And when you consider this, then you say, well, what is the relevance of a 30-year loan or a 50-year loan if people are only spending 12.3 years?
Meaning on a 30-year loan at 6% interest, they've barely begun to pay off their mortgage by the time they sell the home, get a new loan, and start the process over again. Even if they kept the home for the full 30 years, they will have paid $1.2 million to buy that $600,000 home 30 years earlier.
Crazy.
Number one thing about real estate is?
That's crazy because I literally paid for a premium subscription. So why the hell am I seeing an ad?
You got to get busy learning, what am I looking
That's
for?
angry.
What am I trying to buy? What ask?
So why don't more people go for the 15-year mortgage? When you look at a 15-year mortgage, you're going to notice that your monthly payments are significantly more expensive. And here's a real example of a $500,000 house, 6% interest, 20% down. If you pick a 30-year mortgage.
Now, this is really important. I'm glad he brought this up because almost no one's going to talk about a 15-year mortgage because it's a very uncommonly used thing. But previously it was. Before the Great Depression, it was a thing, right? So I'm happy that he's even going through these numbers. So he's using a $500,000 home price point, which in many markets is not necessary. Meaning, I should say it's not typical that people are buying a house that expensive.
Your monthly payment's going to be about $2,400 a month, and a lender will qualify you for that payment if you make about $7,500 a month or 3 times the mortgage payment. Pretty simple. However, if you get a 15-year mortgage, your monthly payment's going to be about $3,300 a month, which is going to require you to have an income of $10,000 a month in order to qualify. So what do most people do? That's right. They choose the lower priced option. It allows them to.
I just want to point out something to you. $10,000 a month, right? Times 10 would be 100,000, and then add those other 2 months, that's $120,000 top line, which is not a ton of money. So there you go. And the difference between the 30-year mortgage and a 15-year mortgage, about $1,000. I'd say that's very significant.
So what do most people do? That's right. They choose the lower priced option. It allows them to qualify with less income. It allows them to their purchase price by 34%, which is a lot. Like, that's the difference between you buying a $500,000 home and a $670,000 home. And even though, sure, with a 15-year mortgage, much less of your payment is being eaten away by interest, for most people, the 30-year option offers more flexibility. It's easier to qualify for. They could get a bigger house. They have more options. And so they go.
So I want you guys to realize the evil in this whole scheme. Generally, loans and credit, it's all evil. But what's happening is that you're just in a different kind of casino, right? You have a group of people, the banksters and the political class. They're trying to entice you to get more with less, which is to say, they'll give you a huge 30-year term so that you can buy more house. You can qualify for more money. But frankly, you really are buying something that's kind of outside of what you should have because it's requiring you to give up 30 years of your life to work. And I just don't think that's sensible. only if you're like victim of greed, and we all are.
for it. That's why most people think, oh, a 30-year mortgage is so much less money every single month than a 15-year mortgage, so a 50-year mortgage must be even better, right?
And I'm glad he mentioned that, because that is the very simple mental calculus that we've all gone through. And he's correct. That is the assumption.
Well, that is where most people are 100% wrong. So let's talk about the 50-year mortgage. Over the weekend, Trump tweeted a photo. Earth, would this ever be a good idea? Because it makes me rather excited about it. Like, we already have 144-month car loans and buy now, pay later for Chipotle. Even the developer Pulte retweeted this by saying, thanks to President Trump, we are indeed working on the 50-year mortgage, a complete game changer. Which, for those unaware, Pulte Homes is one of the largest national developers in the United States, having built nearly 1 million homes. They think it'll help them lower their payments. They think they could qualify for a bigger house, and they think it'll help keep the real estate market strong. But mark my words, it won't. It's a bad idea. Anyone who understands math will agree with me. So as far as the actual numbers behind this.
Now, I don't know if when he says bad idea, I don't know if he's suggesting that it's not going to happen, or that people won't use that financial product. Because something is mathematically disadvantageous is not going to prevent people from doing it. If that were the case, then every casino in Las Vegas would be bone dry empty. And oppositely, they're overflowing. And that's why they have the best hotels in the world, because there's just that much extra money that can be utilized to add all those extra amenities. So he may be making a miscalculation on human nature. Shout out to Carter, writes, Peace of Saints, instead of renting from a landlord, now you can just rent directly from the banks, aka the government, low-key. Except now you're responsible for the repairs on the home and the property taxes. What a great deal. Bruh, I feel you. I feel you 100%. Shout out to 7. He writes, this 50-year mortgage seems like a desperate attempt at extending the lifeline of the American consumer, right? What is keeping America on top, and how much longer can America sustain its position? Well, when you say on top, I mean, what does that mean anymore? Does it mean a better quality of life? Does it mean a stronger currency? The quality of life is better in South Korea. It's better in the Middle East. In terms of the currencies are much stronger in the Middle East and in Britain and in Europe. So it's like, what are we on top in? That's the challenging part.
And what it actually means for anyone who gets one, here's what you came for. Although before we go into that, if people are else that over for sport at just $0 a month, it's some back or cell phone, even though government, which is a lot, a year to a 30-year mortgage will improve your affordability by 34%, which is a lot. Going from a 30-year to a 50-year mortgage improves affordability by less than 8%. Yes, you heard that correctly. Getting a 50-year mortgage will make almost no difference whatsoever, except you're going to be taking on way more debt for your entire life. And
that's crazy, for your entire life, and there's only an improvement of 8%. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that's not significant. It's statistically significant, right? But it is not significant in terms of, you experiencing like a better quality of life or anything like that.
If you don't believe me, here's some of the math. First of all, it's important to mention that overall, the longer of a loan term you get, the higher the interest rate is going to be, because lenders want to be compensated for tying up capital for longer. Like right now, it's 6.125% if you want to get a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, but it's only 5.375% if you want to get a 15-year. So I promise, with a 50-year mortgage, you'll wind up paying closer to 7% because there's significantly more risk. This means if you get a $500,000...
I agree with him wholeheartedly, and I've worked on a number of real estate deals, and consistently, when you manipulate certain variables, like maybe you want to qualify for more money, they're like, yeah, we can do that, but we're gonna have to charge you this in interest, or you're gonna have to pay for these points, or you're gonna have to buy down the interest rate. I agree wholeheartedly that with the 50-year mortgage, you're going to see higher interest rates than you would on a 30-year. I think that's a completely accurate assumption.
$1,000 loan at 6% fixed for 30 years. Your monthly payment's going to be $3,000 a month. But if you think you're about to save a ton of money stretching out your payment to 50 years, well, guess what? At a 7% interest rate for 50 years, your monthly payment's going to drop.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on.
Boy, Google is really scamming. Before I did this live session for you guys, I spent my money on premium.
$1 a month. Wait, it actually gets more expensive? Yes. In fact, even if the interest rate... Wait, it actually gets more expensive? Yes. In fact, even if the interest rate is the exact same on a 50-year mortgage as it is on a 30-year mortgage, which is mathematically impossible, by the way, but just for the sake of the argument, let's just assume that...
Now, I just want to reiterate what he's saying in case you missed that. He's saying that you're assuming once you go from the 30-year mortgage to the 50-year mortgage, all would be well. Your payments are going to drop down for sure. He says, but factor this in. Often when you guys are comparing the 30-year mortgage to the 50-year mortgage, you're keeping the interest rates consistent. You shouldn't do that. The interest rate's going to be higher on the 50-year. I think he's 100% correct. And that means that you're seeing miscalculations. I do believe we just saw that exact miscalculation on the PBD podcast just a little while ago.
Aliens have abducted everybody and we live in an alternate universe where that is the case, your monthly payment would drop from $3,000 down to just $2,632 a month. To put that into perspective, that's basically the equivalent of you saving 10% in your mortgage or being able to qualify for a home that costs 10% more. That is it, for nearly doubling the time it takes to pay off the loan in the first place. And like I said, the realistic savings would be pretty much non-existent because there is no way that they could offer a 50-year mortgage term at the same rate as a 30-year mortgage term unless it's subsidized by the government or it's just baked into the purchase price. And if they do that, we're all going to end up paying for it in the form of higher prices and probably higher taxes. Not to mention, there is another concern with all of this, and that would be investors. Here's the part that nobody talks about. 30-year mortgages are only...
Ladies and gents, I'll give you a little bit of time to send your comments and questions as we wind down. Shout out to Zachary. He writes, "Every creator, are you enjoying using Kick or Twitch? Twitch is marginally better from a technical standpoint when you're actually streaming because you can at least see how many people are watching, whereas I'm streaming through StreamYard onto Kick, and I cannot see how many people are watching, which is something that you'd like to see. However, the analytics for Kick are a lot more transparent and honest, and you can chop up the data very easily by individual day or stream, live stream, and that's of infinite value. It allows you to make things more predictable, especially for those people who are living off of streams, right? Like, or I should say it's like their livelihood. So it allows you to make sure that you're not being cheated. With Twitch, it's so convoluted to figure out how much money you made in a given stream that they could easily steal from you. And frankly, they probably are stealing a little something. Now, for example, if you're curious, like, hey, Marquett, a stream like this, how much would you make? Probably about like $3. Like, you're not even making minimum wage, literally. Probably like $3 or something like that you'd make. But at least you know you made $3, and therefore you can then predict and scale up and figure out, like, is this something I can do for a living? Is this something I can't? If I wanted to be a live streamer for a living, and say, for example, you did a stream like this and you have 100 people on consistently for 1 hour, and then you make $3, and you'll know, like, well, if I really want to make a living at this, then I'd have to make more money per hour. I'd have to make at least, say, $40 per hour. If I'm making $3 for 100 people for an hour, then I know that I need to multiply that by, like, say, 15. So 15 times 100 people, that'd be 1,500 people on the live stream. So then you have to ask yourself, what do I have to talk about? What do I have to do to get 1,500 people on a live stream? Once you figure that out, you're like, okay, cool, I can live off of this. Whereas with Twitch, you can't really make that calculation because the pay metrics are not very transparent. And speaking of the fact that, one makes about $3-4 on a live stream such as this, I do want to thank, of course, all of my members. You make all of this possible. Shout out to Mr. Graham, comes in by Venmo. He writes, thank you for all the education, Saint. Can't wait to hear you speak this wisdom at the training center once it is built. I appreciate that. I look forward to it too. It'll be a great time. There'll be so many different things we can do at and with the training center.
Viable because most people keep their home for about 10 years and then they sell their home, the loan gets paid back, and then they start the process over again. That is why mortgage rates are so heavily tied to the 10-year treasury yield. Essentially, the two are interchangeable. So when mortgages are bundled together and sold on the secondary market, it gives investors a stable return that they could count on, and it provides more liquidity back into the markets immediately to go and issue more loans. On the other hand, a 50-year loan holds a massive risk to whoever buys and holds on to that loan.